I do see some faces. I got a little square in a corner. Yes, so I will present about strategic pathway number 7, which is about partnerships. And same as all the previous ones, is based on a combination of the strategic pathway 7 from the IGIF consultation draft, and also with the add-on of the relevant information found in the IGIF Hydro document. And for context, this is the number 7, and it's marked in the picture which one we're going to be talking about, which is part of the bigger framework. So why partnerships? That was the first thing that I came across when I started reading the document. And partnerships is one of the 5 pillars of the UN Decade Sustainable Goals, which are also referred to as the 5 Ps. And you can find it here alongside with people, prosperity, peace, and planet. It also acknowledged that it is what allows coordination of policies and strategies and their implementation. And that's quite an important thing. And something that can seem obvious, but it's important to always remember, is that when we join efforts, we can leverage each other's strengths and we can maximize the potential of our resources. We can also exploit synergies, and we can start to get more into the culture of sharing. In the headline of the document, here it's establishing that this is a very important premise to developing and sustaining an enduring nationally integrated geospatial information framework. When we talk about partnerships, we're also talking about cross-sector, interdisciplinary, we're talking about collaborations, cooperations, coordinations at all levels, whether nationally or internationally. And the objective of this document is to create some kind of culture of doing these partnerships in an inclusive, trusted way, and use it to the advantage of the organizations to create strategic alliances. I've chosen to jump straight to this type of drawing because I thought it explained it better. And this is just covering the overall picture of what's going to be the approach of how do we go about partnerships. And here's some key points. It's very important to understand the unique strengths of each organization that comes into the partnership. What do they bring, and why are they interested in this collaboration or partnership? It also allows for the geospatial information, the products, the services, and everything around them to open into new markets by partnering with different kind of people and stakeholders. It also exposes the geospatial information to new communities and applications. And I think this is something that is very important. And we're going to see later that in the IGIF-H is also mentioned as something very, very relevant. It also, there's acknowledgement on the key role of the public and the private sector as the holders of the technology and the holders of the knowledge, but then also acknowledging that they need to open up for partnering with others so the use of the technology can be maximized. And then again, the value of the geospatial information, which we've broadly covered in this group with our fantastic document of the value of hydrographic data. And just by acknowledging that there is a chance for creating the culture of those partnerships and opening up to discover new opportunities. When we look about the elements of the approach, well, we have four categories, and each of them have their own purpose. So in the first one, we talk about cross-sector and interdisciplinary cooperation. This is what allowed for different perspectives to be considered when looking at a problem. And then it's kind of a whole new perspective of that problem is created, and that can trigger that the solutions that are unlocked are also much more in the edge of innovation and new thoughts. Then there is the private sector and academia collaboration. This is perceived here as mostly something towards research and development and things to create capacity building outputs, and to also increase the skill level of those who are involved in these partnerships in general. Then we have the international collaboration, which is all about leveraging each partner's integrated geospatial information management, and with that accomplish common goals. And here is always, there's a few mentions to making sure that you know your own interests before you engage in those, and that you're sure that you don't end up losing track of what was that you are after as a specific national agency involved in international collaboration. I think it's quite interesting, that one. And then the last one is the community participation. It's mentioned that the partnerships with the civil societies and communities are actually the ones that have the biggest potential to make a very direct effect in the community and in the people of the area, because it's normally quite clear what is that is needed, and it has a lot of benefits of engaging the community. And I chose to put right here the input about the IGIF-H, because it's mostly related to these specific topics we just talked about. And the IGIF-H talks about the very importance of developing data sharing partnerships. I think this is something that we know a lot about, and we would all like to see more of that happening. It mentions also crowdsourced bathymetry as one of those important community engagement approaches, which I was very happy to see there, of course. And it talks about partnerships in support of transformational research and innovation. I think it was also mentioned last time how much emphasis was made in the IGIF-H in everything that has to do with triggering innovation, and that's quite positive as well. And the last one in the list here is expanding the partnerships to other non-hydro, technical, and economic domains that will become increasingly important to advance innovation for the blue economy. I think this one is really key, and this is a conversation that we've been having in this working group quite often. How can we also be more open to other people who manage other type of data, so we really make that jump of making the real difference of what we're doing can go over the threshold of this hydrographic data and all the standards and all of those things that are very technical. How can we open up to the rest of the world and help us to unlock that value of our data? And then the other thing that they mention quite useful for us as a reference, some of the partnerships that are already going, which are mentioned here, something like the Argo program, the Global Ocean Observing System, even CIVET 2030 project is mentioned here, sea level monitoring facility. So somehow is like this kind of partnerships and collaborations is something that is very familiar for most of us, and I think that's something that we should be proud of. And then some other more informal partnerships, which I think can also be inspiring, because it doesn't always have to be so formal and so epic, and it can make huge differences. Things like whale spotting, catch by catch, marine debris tracking. I've even seen recently a lot of those things where they put mobile phones in the beach where people monitor the water line. So all of those initiatives, I feel they have a lot of potential, and they're also having a lot of weight in the document. So when we go about the guiding principles, it talks about the mutual respect, the trust, and it makes a lot of emphasis about how building the trust takes time. So I feel we all need to remember that you don't need to rush into partnerships. Sometimes it's better to listen first and see what can happen. And leadership, we know leadership is hard, but then when you have more entities to coordinate, then it gets even harder. So it's quite important. The need to share a vision and to share the goals. And the transparency and communication, I think that's one of the other super key roles that is also mentioned in several places, where everything needs to be traceable, everything needs to be measurable, and that's something that when we're in a rush, sometimes we forget, and this is way more important when you don't have somebody in the desk, sitting in the desk next to you that you can talk to and ask things. It helps to build that trust that is so hard to find sometimes. And yeah, some other things like the realism and the clarity of the scope, that's also something that it's by default a challenge. And then when you enter a partnership, you need to make sure that we agree that this is the scope and that we understand it in the same way, and that both interests are considered there. And of course, this important thing, we just saw that a few minutes ago when we were having that conversation about policies for indigenous communities, and replicating a set of things that work in one place in another doesn't necessarily work. So it takes time to figure out what are the right keys, and taking into account things like the cultural aspects, the maturity of the organizations, the priorities, and their interest. And now we jump into the big core of this, which is the actions. I feel like here is where it comes the most of the tangible tips of what to do, how to do this. It does not mean that it's easy, because it has a lot of steps, but somehow I've divided this to be a little bit more digestible in three sections. The first section is about figuring out what kind of partnerships do you need, and what are going to be your criteria for a good partnership. So somehow is the phase where you need to ask yourself a lot of questions. Then the second phase is where you put yourself out there and try to see who's up for grabs for making partnerships, and try to make sure that those criteria that you had established, you're going to meet them. So somehow you're still going to be making yourselves a lot of questions. And then the last stage is all about managing that, from formalizing the partnership and making the contracts, communication, and then, of course, everything to do with the governance and the project management, if that's the case, and evaluation, and reviewing that things are going according to what was planned. So as these are a lot of points with a lot of detail, I've just put up a few of them that I found the most useful, that I'm going to go a little bit more in detail as we move forward. Of course, interrelated actions, very important, because a lot of this has overlap with the other strategic pathways. And here, what we can see is that the heaviest part is what has to do with strategy, and with things like how does my strategy fit into this specific partnership that I'm planning to go into. There's also an important part about the engagement and communication plans, which has also overlap with another strategic pathway, number 9, and things to do with stakeholders, because of course in your stakeholder list are probably going to be found most of your potential partners. When it comes to the tools that we are provided in this document for aiding this selection criteria, well, again, it's about thinking, what do you want out of this partnership? What is that your organization needs? And then it's giving some clear clear paths, which I like because it has a lot of middle steps. So it gives a lot of chances to rethink about it. I feel like these days we end up in a situation where there's a chance to collaborate. We're right here. We want to do it, and sometimes that's really great, but sometimes maybe we don't have the same objective. So I feel like asking questions over and over again is something that is really good and really emphasized in the document. I've just put here, I'm not going to go through them or read them, but I wanted to have them in the slides, is those questions that I've been talking about that I found most useful. So when you try to frame the need for a partnership, do I actually need a partnership? And what is the purpose of my organization? What do I need to do in the coming future that actually makes the case for me needing to engage in a partnership? Because again, partnerships can help you a lot, but they can also give you a lot of extra work. So before you enter in this kind of adventure, it would be a good idea to have this figured out. And then other good questions and reflections for when you are actually out there to select who would you like to go in a partnership with. And there's things like, what is the potential of this partnership filling the knowledge gap that I have right now in my organization? How is this going to affect how the public sees and perceives my organization? Will this make me more likable for future staff? And will this help me retain my current staff? So it's a lot of important reflections. The degree of cultural fit between the partners, this is something that is also very emphasized, because it can seem like on paper we have similar interests, but if we're not going to be able to understand each other and we have very different ways to work, perhaps that's not your ideal partner. So all of these things need to be leveraged and need to be asked over and over again. And last but not least, the outcomes. And here I've wrapped a little bit about, so there is the outcomes that are here as what is presented as the potential of partnerships. So of course you can increase your capacity, you can share knowledge, you can help to boost creativity and innovation. There's a lot of things that can happen, but how do you actually measure if this happened, right? So I'll mix this a little bit with the part that had to do about the management of the partnership, because, well, first of all, accept that not all of the outcomes are going to be tangible, and some of those are also very valuable. And I think it's very good that the document is acknowledging that. And then the kind of management that you have established during the partnership is what's going to enable that you can actually make these measurements and make sure that you got the right outcomes based on what you defined that was your interest on that partnership, or the common interest in the partnership. And last but not least, I want to make a huge emphasis on this. It seems small, but it's huge. The virtual collaboration tools is mentioned in different ways, but that's something that it can make a huge difference, especially when you're partnering with people that are across the globe. This is something that is, I think we're all still kind of learning, and we all have good experiences when some tools have worked really well and have made all of our jobs easier. But I'm sure I'm not alone here when sometimes it's like, this is becoming complicated. Where should I put these files? Google Drive or in Teams, or should I send an email? All of that. There is a lot of value in taking some time, slow down before starting fresh things, because that's when the opportunities are more available to create new patterns and new culture. And this is also something that is mentioned a lot in the document, the opportunity to create a culture of sharing. And if we already are predefined that we're going to be sharing, then we need to put all of the focus and all of the emphasis in saying how we're going to do that, how we're going to communicate, because that's also a lot of the potential places where things can get complicated, and it can create misunderstandings that could have been avoided, that were not even real. So I think this is what I have. I've put in the end the other format of the summary for those who are now very much attached to this way of seeing. I think I agree with you, Helen, that it's good that you can see it in different ways, then your brain processes it a bit nicer. So I've put this in the last 2 slides just as a bonus, but this is my presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Billy. And I really liked how you pulled that together and how you presented the slides. Thank you for taking the time to do that. It was really helpful, and lots of really valid things to consider there. Any questions? Anything that anyone wants to add to that presentation?
I think it's very insightful. Many of us will be working with stakeholders and connecting across a wide range of domains and expertise and organizations. And I feel like we sometimes go into those engagements without necessarily a good plan or a good process, and that's potentially a reminder for us to just take some time and address the right questions and the outcomes we want from those engagements. So this is definitely something I will be reflecting on in some of my work. Thank you very much for digesting all of that material for us.
Thank you. Stuart.
I think it'll also be useful to kind of connect into some of the other stuff that we've been talking about in terms of Indigenous groups, because that's obviously a different way of partnering and engaging, and the time frames can be significantly longer than other types of engagement and communicating or partnering. So something that I think is worth capturing somehow, or at least being aware of.
Something I just want to share a reflection. Something that I worked on when I was doing my MBA thesis is the fact that all of the change management theories, they acknowledge how important it is, the people element, but then they all just try to accommodate the people to what somebody already has decided. And I did actually quite a lot of research around flipping that and say, can you not just, if the whole of the change management theory is just fighting against the people, can you not just put the people first and make it so the people actually define what the strategy needs to be, and everything else accommodates around that. It might be that it doesn't fit with the idea that whoever initiated the change had. It requires a little bit of letting go of one's idea of how the change needs to look like, or how this partnership in this case needs to look like. But I believe it's much more organic, and it can be much more successful.
Couldn't agree more.